Just last week, I was supporting one of my customers at a client meeting, and we were talking about having a exclusivity contract with a customer. And one of the things that we put into the contract was a rebate agreement. And the business had never thought about having rebate agreements before. And I think this is a really powerful sales tool for helping to grow your business and to get things like preferred supplier contracts and exclusivity contracts with your customers in place. So I just want to cover off today some of the best practices around rebates and some of the do's and don'ts and how you can really make the contract work to the best of your ability. So when you're offering a rebate to your customers, or indeed getting a rebate from your suppliers, then what it tends to be is normally a 12-month contract, but sometimes longer, and you'll say that when you hit a certain level of business, you'll get money back at the end of the term. So it may be that you agree higher prices up front, but if, for example, you buy £100,000 worth from them, then they'll actually give you a 3% rebate back, which means that in effect you've had a 3% discount, just not at the time of purchase. So rebates can be a phenomenal way of reducing your cost base and also building these long-term relationships with your suppliers and also your customers. Now, thinking about offering rebate agreement to your customers. Now, it's really important that with rebates, what you want to try and avoid is offering a rebate to your customer based on the existing business that they do with you at the moment. So it should normally be only paid on growth, because if you have a customer that already does £500,000 turnover with you and you say to them next year, I'll give you a 1% rebate. If you start from zero and pay 1% on everything, you're essentially losing 1% of your profit already, just for that customer doing the same thing with you. So what you want to say to that is, Mr. Customer, if you do 500k with us next year, then you'll be entitled to a rebate and we'll pay 1% on everything above that. So you always want to have a minimum in there that the rebate only kicks in after your customer has got into growth. So my second tip for negotiating rebate contracts is to always put a percentage in and not a pound value. And again, this is about protecting your profitability mostly, because if you put a percentage in that says when you get to 600k you get 1%, then firstly, it means the customer is rewarded commensurate to every pound that they spend with you. So actually, from the customer's perspective, this can be really powerful as well, because they get a discount on all their spend. When you work with pounds, what is common is that you will say to your customer, okay, when you get to 10k, you can get 1k rebate. When you get to 20k, you can get 2k rebate. And the problem with this situation is that it encourages your customer to place one final order with you as they're approaching the end of the rebate period, to just get over here, just get over this line. So regardless of whether the customer spends £21,000 with you or £29,000, you're going to pay them 2k. And therefore, the margin, the gross profit that you make and the impact on your profitability can be quite significant depending on your customer's behaviour, really. And I've seen customers time and time again play rebates to do this. In fact, it's really good practice if you've got rebates with your suppliers and they've got these sorts of kickers in them, then you always want to make sure that you're just spending enough to get over the next kicker, because that means that as a percentage, the cost, like your gross margin, is the highest it can be. So I would always recommend building the rebate contracts so that you've got percentages and not pounds included in them to avoid this. So the next thing I always recommend that you do with your rebate contracts is to have them stepped, because what you don't want is a situation where, again, if the customer does 10k, they get 1%. If they do 20k, they get 2%, and so on. Now, what you want to actually say to your customer is that all spend between 10 to 20k is at 1%, and then 20k to 30k is at 2%. Because if you only got an extra 10k from your customer, then 1% seems fair. But if that customer does just a little bit more to get into this kicker, again, then as with what we saw here, your gross profit is quite significantly impacted. So this is what we mean when we say a stepped rebate agreement. So all spend between these amounts will be at 1%, all spend between these amounts will be at 2%. And you can really keep this going up as high as possible, but you do need to be mindful in the back of your mind what your net profit percentage is. Because if you're making 5% net profit and you give away an additional 5% to your customer, then that is your profit completely gone. So it's really important that when you are setting these rebate contracts that you know what your net profit percentage is and that you are never giving away more than your net profit percentage, because then that means you're making a loss. And the final tip that I've got for you when it comes to negotiating rebate contracts with your customers is to always have regular reviews, because you only want a rebate agreement to drive business, really. Sometimes you do have to put a rebate contract in place to retain business, but generally, the problem with putting a rebate contract for retention purposes is that if you don't have any other reason than this customer is staying with you other than a rebate, they're always a flight risk, because that means that essentially your relationship is based on price. So that's why I don't like retention rebates, because I think you need to find another way to retain your customers other than price, because you'll just get hammered down on price year after year. Whereas when we're having a positive conversation with a customer about growing together and it being a mutually beneficial agreement, then you want to be using this actively to have regular reviews with your customers and to look at how you can move them between the kickers so that they get more rebate paid out, essentially. So I see this time and time again that these rebates get put in place and they just don't get reviewed until the end of the 12-month period, when the customer comes and says, "Can I please have my credit note?" And what you don't know is whether that rebate has had any impact on the customer's behaviour and whether that has meant that the customer has increased their spend with you, or would you have got that business anyway? So you need to be close to your customer. You need to be using it to drive business and have regular conversations with your customer about what more could you sell to them, or what more could they buy from you in order to maximise the rebate that they are getting paid from you. So I would always recommend that you do that, ideally quarterly, but at worst case scenario, have a 6-month and a 12-month review as well. So I will put a rebate contract onto my website, which you can download completely for free. It's just, so have a look and download it from profitcashgrowth.com from the free resources and help section. It will be a Word document, it will be fully customizable, and do let me know how you get on negotiating rebates with your customers.